Welcome back to the channel. I haven't posted a video in quite a while. It's probably been a couple months. I've had a busy summer and I had some parts issues that I ran into on the car, so I just ran out of time to get stuff done. So I kind of just been reorganizing things this summer so that now that it's fall, I can start working again. Um, I've still been doing a little bit of work on the car. I've got new carpet in. I got the sunroof back in it with all new weather stripping, and I've started cutting the carpet around the roll cage to get the interior in. Biggest thing I'm waiting on, the short block for the engine is done. Um, but I need cylinder heads. That was kind of the parts trouble I had ran into. Was I had ordered all the valve train for this combination, and then turned out the cylinder heads I thought I was going to use for this, they needed a lot of machine work to work with the valve train, and it wasn't really worth it because I was planning on upgrading the heads anyway. But the timing of it just kind of made me decide to wait, because I didn't really have the time to buy new heads, send them to the machine shop, and still get the car built in time. So I kind of put a hold on it for the summer, and yeah, now that it's back into the fall again, I've been getting back on working on some of this stuff. I got to finish the interior, and I'll hopefully have cylinder heads here in a couple months. I've still got some work to do in the back end for the tin work, but I'm not really working on that today. I've got another project in the shop here. It's got nothing to do with cars, but it's a '08 CRF250R. I had bought it at my previous job as a motorcycle mechanic. Some guy brought it in and it was blown up, and he didn't want to spend the money to fix it, so I bought it off him. I've gone through the frame already, and I cleaned it all up, and new steering stem bearings and everything I did yesterday. And today I was going to do a video on rebuilding the front forks. These things are in pretty rough shape. They're both leaking terribly, and they're just really dirty. So I've got a whole fork seal kit and stuff. So I figured I would change things up because I wanted to put out a video, and I'll work on the bike. And if it's something that people are interested in, I'll probably film building the rest of the bike and put it all on the channel. I'm also going to probably start on my 78 F250 here in the next coming weeks and make some videos on it. I had started years ago, well, maybe a year ago, restoring the frame and all the suspension, and yeah, I've been wanting to get back on it, and this cab needs a bunch of work and needs floors and some other rust repair. So that'll probably be another project I work on this winter alongside the car and the bike. So I'll get the camera set up and we'll start working on these fork rebuild. All right, so like I said, these forks are in really rough shape. You can see all the oil they've been leaking and all the dirt that's built up around the dust seals, and they're just really dirty overall. So we'll go through them and get them fixed. First thing you want to do before taking them apart is there's the compression and rebound adjustments on the top and bottom. You just kind of want to back those off as much as you can. Now, if I were rebuilding these like for a bike that was already put together, I would take note of how many clicks out they are so that you could set them as the same. But I don't really care to do that because I'm kind of starting from scratch on this bike. So I'll just back them out all the way, and then we'll set them at a neutral position when I put them back together. All right, the other thing now I want to do is try to get as much of this junk off of the tube as I can, because when I try to get the seals off, you want to be careful not to scratch this tube too much. So I'll try to get as much of this off as I can. Okay, now I can dump the oil out of these. I had already cracked the top nut here loose when I had the forks in the triple clamp because they are pretty tight. This uses a 50 mil nut on this one. The fluid is actually pretty clear still. All right, once we drain most of the fluid out, can put it back together and just screw this back in. All right, now we need to get the center bolt out from the bottom of the dampener rod. It's a 21 millimeter, and then there is one special tool you need. You can make these also, but it's like a holder for the dampener rod. This one's from Race Tech. Like I said, you can make one of these pretty easy out of a flat piece of steel, but I have one from all my years working on bikes previous. I'll go ahead and break that center bolt loose. Okay, and once that's threaded out all the way, I'll push on the top of the fork to push the dampener rod out and slide the holder in. And now I'll put there's a lock nut here. We'll put a wrench on the lock nut and the 21 mil socket back on that and break them loose and thread that all the way off. You want to make sure you unthread this, not the lock nut. Keep the lock nut on the dampener rod. Okay, and then once that's out, there's also this little dampener rod pin in here. That comes out. Okay, and then I can push the fork tube back out, pull out the rod, and then we can separate the dampener rod from the outer and inner tubes. All right, and there's the whole dampener rod assembly. You can take that out. And then there's also the spring. All right, to separate the inner and outer tube, there's this outer seal here, or this isn't the seal, this is the dust cover. So pop that dust cover off. And then once the dust cover's off, there's a little, you can see that little silver, it's like a little retaining clip. So just with a small screwdriver, you can kind of pry the end of it like that. And then once you get it started, you can just kind of work it out the rest of the way. Like that. And then to separate the inner and the outer tube, just slide them opposite each other, and it'll pull out the seal and the bushings. And then the outer tube is empty. And then you can see there's the seal, the fork seal itself, as well as the bushings. The bushings actually look like they're almost new. This one has a tiny bit of wear on it, but obviously I think there was just too much dirt and dust was getting into this one, causing this seal to leak. So we'll replace it all anyway. So now, you said you got the inner and outer, and then the last part is there's this other little cartridge in here that would take out. And to do that, I just, again, use the 50 mil on the outside. I think this is a 19. Okay, and then once this is unthreaded all the way, sometimes these can be tough to get out. So normally what I do is push down on the dampener rod, and it'll push air up, and it'll pop this top tube out, and then you can pull the cartridge out. And as you see, the cartridge has some O-rings and another couple bushings on there. Again, this looks pretty good. And then it can drain the rest of the oil out of the cartridge. All right, now that it is all disassembled, I'll go ahead and clean the inner and outer tubes, get them all perfectly clean, and then I'll come back after I do that and we'll show you how to reassemble. All right, I got everything clean, ready to go back together. The first thing I do to assemble, once the fork tube is all cleaned up, is get the seals and the new bushings on. I happen to have one of these fork bullets that do help, but if you don't have one, you could just wrap the top in electrical tape anywhere there's a sharp edge, just so you don't cut the seal when you put it on. You can use fork oil. I usually use a little grease, just like waterproof grease, as well, to aid in sliding the new seals on. All right, first one that goes on is the dust seal. And then the clip. And then the actual seal itself. And I'll kind of do the same thing. I usually put a little bit of grease along the inside lip of this as well. And it also doesn't hurt to put some on the outside. I find it makes it a lot easier to install the seal into the outer tube. Then the bullet can come off. And then this stopper ring goes on behind the seal. Also make sure the seal is in the right orientation. Obviously it's a direction, so the spring will go kind of towards the bottom. And then this first bushing, this one you will want to put a little bit of fork oil just along the inside and outside. I like this Maxima fork oil, and it's just 5-weight oil. And then for this seal, or for this bushing, you do need to just expand it a little bit, as there is a groove in the outside of this tube that it kind of snaps into. And then also make sure it has some fork oil on it. this point, the outer tube and the inner one can go together. And then, like I said, that stopper ring goes down, and then the fork seal itself. And then I'll have to reset the camera, and there's a seal driver you use to install this seal all the way. All right, so this fork seal driver is just one from Motion Pro, and you just center the seal and then just pound it down until it fully seats. And as soon as you hear it bottom out, then that's enough. Once that seal is in, that little clip, like I said, you just work it back in, and it should snap back into place. And then you just want to work it around the whole outside and make sure all three sides are fully snapped into the groove. And then you can slide the dust seal down, and a lot of times you can just press the dust seal down, or you can kind of slide the tube down and fully install it. Yeah, and then once the inner and outer tubes are all put back together, you can kind of slide it up and down a bit, make sure it feels smooth and there's no binding or anything. And then we can move on to reassembling the dampener rod. I need to go check the spec for oil, and then we'll get that filled up and installed next. All right, so we'll fill up the dampener rod. It takes 180-ish milliliters to fill the tube. There's kind of a bleed procedure, so even if you're a little bit more or less, you'll know when you bleed it because all the excess gets bled off. So I always make sure the dampener rod is fully extended, and then I can fill it up. And once you fill it, you need to bleed the air out. And the way you do that is by cycling this rod up and down really slow, and you'll hear it bubble, and it'll push all the air out of it. Sometimes you got to cycle it, a dozen times or more. Okay, once you're confident that all the air is out, we can put the cartridge back in. Make sure the piston is all the way extended before you try to put this in. And then we put new O-rings on the bottom and new O-ring on the top. And you can just kind of push this cartridge all the way in until it seats, and then you could start threading it. All right, now the cartridge is back installed in the dampener rod. You could bleed out any excess oil that might be in there. There's these couple bleed holes on the outside of this. And to do that, you just want to move the dampener rod up and down a bunch of times, and this will kind of help bleed out any residual oil that isn't needed inside. And then actually in the Honda service manual, I remember they actually recommend you put this dampener rod side on the ground and press from the top and fully compress the dampener rod, and that will push any excess oil past the cartridge so that you can dump it out. And then if I turn this over, And then one way to kind of test if you have this dampener rod done correctly is to compress this all the way and then let it go. And if it springs all the way back out on itself and there's no extra play, then you know you've probably done a good enough job bleeding all the air out of it. Sometimes if you don't bleed the air out and you compress it like that and let it go, it'll only come out halfway or 2/3 of the way, and then you actually have to manually pull it the rest of the way. Then you'd have to pull this cartridge back out and kind of start the whole process over again to make sure it's bled correctly. But this one is good, so I can continue on assembling. Okay, from here it's almost just the reverse of what we did disassembling it. So the fork spring can go back into the tube, and then the dampener rod can go before you put the dampener rod in. You make sure this lock nut here, make sure it's bottomed all the way out against the rod, not tight, just snug it all the way up to so that it's not backed out any. And then this can be installed. And then you can kind of temporarily put the outer tube back up and thread it on. And then we'll do the same as before. I'll get this in the vise and we'll push the rod out the end and use the holder, and then we can reinstall that center nut. This piston can go back in the end of the dampener rod. And then there was also a new O-ring on the pin, or this nut. Put some more fork oil on that. And then with this, you want to tighten this down until it's snug. And when it's snug, it shouldn't be bottomed out on the lock nut. There should be a little gap, and then you tighten the lock nut up to this center pin. See there, I just felt it bottom out, and you could see there is a little gap here, so that's what you want. And then we'll put the wrench back on here. And we'll tighten the lock nut down against this. Now I can go back, compress this all again, slip the pin out, and then I can tighten the nut down. The torque spec on this, I believe, is 50 foot-pounds. Okay, and now that that's all tightened up, the only thing left to do is to slide the outer tube back down and fill it with fork oil in the outer tube. I think the spec on that is I'll have to check. I think it's around 400 milliliters, so I'll go look at that and we'll fill it up. All right, the recommended from the service manual is 400 milliliters. Obviously, you can put in more or less. There's a minimum and maximum range, and I think it's like 320 and 420. And the less full it is, the softer the fork will be near full compression, and the more fluid you put in, the stiffer it'll be at full compression. So I'll just go right where it recommends at 400. You just dump this right inside the outer tube. And if you did everything right, when you go put the outer tube back on, all the fork oil stays in, doesn't spill out the bottom. And I'll go ahead and just snug the cap down. It's way easier to really tighten these caps down once the fork is installed on the bike and the triple clamp is holding the fork. But that's the one complete. There's no leaks or anything yet, which is good. The fork obviously is super stiff at this time, but yeah, it's pretty straightforward. There's service manuals online to do it, and there's really only a couple. The fork, while the wrench and the fork seal driver are really the only special tools you need. Everything else is pretty basic tools. I'll go ahead and get the camera set up, and I'll go through the other one quick, and then we could get both these installed on the bike. There it is, all wrapped up. Again, like I said, it's not a very hard job to do, and with basic hand tools and just a couple specialty tools, like I said, if I wasn't filming this, I could probably get through both forks and have them rebuilt in maybe 2 hours, including cleaning them and everything. So it's not something that's hard to do. The service manuals are online. But yeah, I might post the rest of the videos as I keep working on this bike. If people are interested in it, then I'll keep posting them as I pick away at the bike. The engine and everything needs a complete rebuild, so I'll be going through all that. But like I mentioned before, I'll probably start some videos on the truck soon, and then once I get some cylinder heads, we'll hop back on the car and get it done to race this year. So thanks for watching, and come back next time.